So today, like I said, we're going to talk about falls, and we have a very special guest, an expert on the topic. She has been working in this field for about 25, 30 years, Maria Allen, calling all the way in from Germany today. Hello, Maria.
Great normally in California. Normally in California.
Normally in California.
Right by Germany.
Yes.
Right by Germany.
It's right by Germany, California.
It's right there. It's right there. So thank you so much for being here, Maria. Can you tell us just a real quick intro about your work in this field? And then I'm going to have everybody else go around and just say who they are and do the normal introduction for the new people in the audience.
Sure. I've actually been a physical therapist for 39 years, long time.
Oh, sorry.
Really long time. And I have been working with the Parkinson's community for the last 10 years, pretty exclusively. I'm working in San Luis Obispo area, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, beautiful part of California. And I work with people who need home health. So usually a little bit later stage Parkinson's and all kinds of other things. And I teach therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, how to work with people with Parkinson's through Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, or POWER. I work with Dr. Becky Farley. I'm faculty for them. So I teach 10, 11 courses a year for them. And I love to do education. So I give talks and I work with my community. And so I'm happy to be here. I have this great panel of people to work with and see what kind of questions we can answer and things we can talk about.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Maria. All right, let's go around. I'm going to just call who's on my screen in the order they're on my screen and just say hello, who you are, how long you've been living with Parkinson's, and if there's anything else you want to share. Kat.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Hill. I'm tuning in today from Southern California, from the Airstream. Hi. I've been dealing with Parkinson's now for 8 years, at least from diagnosis, probably more like 10 to 12 years. And what else do I want to say? I'm happy the sun is out down here. So I'm feeling very grateful for that and grateful to see all of you.
Thanks.
That's it.
Christy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Lamamka, and I am here in upstate New York, where we are getting some flurries on and off. I have been formally diagnosed since 2020, but I ignored a lot of symptoms for a long time. So I probably had Parkinson's for quite a bit longer than that, and some really wild prodromal symptoms with REM sleep disorder. So,
Right. Thank you, Doug.
Hi, everyone. Doug Reed, zooming in from Lafayette, Colorado, where the snow, I think, just stopped falling. We got a couple inches this morning. I was out shoveling earlier. I was diagnosed in 2010, about 12 and a half years ago. But my symptoms were present, I don't know, 5 to 7 years beforehand.
Oh. How frustrating to just be like, something's not right and not knowing what is going on for so long. Amber.
Hi, I'm Amber. I am here in El Paso, Texas. I was diagnosed in 2018, so almost 5 years ago. Probably, just like everybody else, probably had symptoms for about 8 or 9 years, though.
Thank you. Tom.
Hi, everybody. Tom Felici here. I'm from Arvada, Colorado, just down the road from Doug and Mel. And it's snowing here. It's really cold. It's probably 20 degrees, so it's refreshing. I was diagnosed in 2008, so it's been about almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years this May.
Great. Thank you. Kevin.
Hi, hi everyone. Kevin here. Sorry, my voice is shot these days.
Too much partying. Yep.
Yeah, too much partying. I am actually from Boulder now, but I'm trying to escape the snow that you guys are living in by driving across the country in my roof tent, which many people say is crazy with Parkinson's. You know you're going to fall climbing up into the tent. But I'm here to defy gravity. That's my job. I've been living with Parkinson's now for about 13 years. And recently went on disability where the reality of falling actually has started to hit, but I'm still in denial. And we'll talk more about that hopefully in the course of this hour.
Yes. So wait, where are you then right now?
Right now, I'm in a motel in Tiburon, California.
Okay.
I just have to note that Kevin and I actually ended up in Bakersfield, California at the same time on the same
Of all
days, but we
places.
didn't know it because we're both crisscrossing
Right.
things. Isn't that
Oh,
that's a trip?
fun. Did you get to see each other?
No.
Oh,
The nomadic life of Parkies.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heather.
Heather Kennedy, I'm in Lafayette, California. And I just heard everybody talking, and I want to mention that there was a falling tree that affected Kat's life too, speaking of falling. And I made a playlist about falling that I can put in the chat box later. It's all
Yes.
the songs that have to do with falling, a little cheeky. I've had Parkinson's probably 20 years. I remember the first symptoms when my daughter was born, but I didn't know until 2011 for sure, and then started taking the medications in 2012. So what a fun time it's been.
Fun times. All right. Last but not least, Brian.
I was diagnosed actually in 2008. The doctor said, well, if you were younger, I'd say you have Parkinson's, but you're too young. So another 2 years later, and then I got diagnosed. Yeah, so 2010, and I'm in Southern California for a short bit, and I just found out Kat's right near me, so I'm going to not miss her. But yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I have a question that I am just going to put out to everybody who's watching. I'd love to know how many or have you experienced falls? Do you have trouble with balance, trouble with gait, freezing of gait, shuffling, festination, anything like that? Share if this is something that is going on for you. Check. Yes. Okay.
Check all of those.
Big issue with festinating gait. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, excellent. Well, you're in the right place. This is going to be excellent. So let's kind of just start, from the beginning. Maria, can you tell us what is going on with people with Parkinson's that makes balance and gait and walking and things that they used to do just so simply before so difficult?
So it's all about your brain and the structures of the basal ganglia that aren't getting enough dopamine, and that regulates your movement. So that's your proprioception, your sense of where you're at, how you're moving. It basically, all your movement gets processed through that system, and that's the system that you have the most problems with. So from the beginning, Parkinson's those movement problems are the symptoms that usually cause you to get diagnosed, right? So the other things that tend to happen, there's problems in the basal ganglia systems that affect some of your initiation, how you move, the automaticity of your movements, right? So things become less automatic. Your brain has issues with doing more than one thing at a time or switching between, like if the rules change, so changes in surfaces, changes in directions, all of those things are basically cognitive or physical set switches where your brain has to be able to switch and do different things. So there's non-motor issues, and then there's some of those motor issues as well too, but it all relates a lot to how your brain is regulating your movement through that basal ganglia system. So posture is another big issue, right? So the tendency to have your feet a little too close together, not have a good tall posture, that tendency to, all that kind of creates some problems for all of us with our balance. It's kind of even normal aging. We all start having more problems with balance. I was telling everybody on the panel today that I actually had a slip and a fall I fell all the way down face first, stepping up a ramp that was slippery. There was, so we all fall. And the older we get, the less, typically the less we have those balance reactions, and the less we use our bodies in those ways and challenges our bodies in those ways, the harder those quick reactions are. But really has to do with the bradykinesia, that force amplitude dysregulation, where you don't quite put the right amount of oomph in to the movements. So your movements can be too slow. It goes in with that posture. Part of that is initiation, coordination, and sequences of movement patterns. All of those things are things your brain regulates, and that's where the problem really starts. It isn't usually a strength issue. Usually it's more of how your brain coordinates all that information for everything else. So somebody talked about, festinating gait or freezing, and they're all complications of Parkinson's that are really complex, right? There's no one single cause of it all.
Right. So could everybody, all the panelists, can you raise your hand if balance, falling, gait is something that you deal with on a daily basis? Yep. Okay. Kat, you haven't had that at all? No?
Not daily,
Okay.
but definitely balance stuff. It's very, very different, my balance.
Uh-huh. Okay. Great. So I'd love to hear from some of you about maybe how you first started noticing it, when you started noticing what was going on in your life, and then how it's progressed over time. Tom and then Heather.
Thanks, Heather. Down there in the corner. It hasn't been a big problem until this last year, and it's becoming bigger and bigger all the time, especially when I'm off. So I get up in the morning, it's that shuffle step, trying to get my day going, and I got to be real careful. Every day I have to be more and more careful. I've only fallen really one time that I can actually attribute to Parkinson's, where I just completely crashed. And fortunately I was okay, but I think what I'd be looking for the rest of the discussion, and I know we're not quite there yet, but it seems like falling is going to be inevitable in our lives. So the strategy that I'm looking at is how can we mitigate the damage that could be done and by moving forward, either learning how to fall or whatever the source might be. But again, it's not a huge problem yet, but it's getting to be there. And I just want to take the steps necessary to take care of myself. Heather?
Yeah, I was just going to say falling is one of our most primal fears, of course, right? I mean, it's right up there with public speaking and I don't know, you fill in the blanks, snakes, spiders. But what I was thinking about was that children's song about how we all fall down. And I'm always falling now that I've had DBS. But I want to be clear here. I don't think it's just because I had DBS that I'm falling. My balance is a wreck since that time, though. And it's not the same for everyone. So please don't be terrified of DBS for yourself. But do look into the fact that it can affect your balance. And I was just doing some research on cats and why they fall on their feet, and their vestibular, is a little different than ours. And how their brain tells them to flip over right away if there's enough time. In other words, a short fall, they can't flip around. A longer fall, they seem to do quite well, which is strange because you think if you fell a long distance, you'd be hurt, but they're lighter than we are. So I fell just 2 days ago and had a mild concussion. And I fell in the nighttime when I was alone. And I got up to use the loo. So what I'm going to tell everybody is make sure you tell your doctor when you fall. And someone mentioned that they had broken a thumb, ribs. Somebody else broke ribs, ouch, and thumb, hip. It's also painful. Make sure that you have those devices nearby to lean on, maybe some handles, and then practice it during the day when you're on, if you can, a little more on. Just keep practicing it and have that sequence ready to go when you're not expecting it. That's what I wanted to add about that.
Thank you. Kevin.
When you go to your neurologist's office, the first thing the nurse asks you is, how many falls have you had since the last visit or the last 30 days? And without fail, I always say none. But then I start thinking back and I go, well, you didn't ask me about near falls, because near falls are every day. I put on my underwear and that's a near fall, right? It's almost humorous watching me, balance on one leg. And so I started thinking like Tom back to serious falls when I denied having them. And I realized over the course of the last 6 years or so, I've had some pretty serious ones. I mean, I fell and lost my both front teeth. I've had near falls. I still ski, by the way, which is ridiculous, I know, as a Parkinson's patient. But I believe that challenging balance through different drills and exercises are really important. But I, for the first time, had a serious ski fall this winter where I also broke a rib. I noticed others have said that they've broken their ribs. And I think the reality of the seriousness of a fall really started to hit home because of that broken rib, I didn't exercise for 5 months. And that almost killed me more than the fall itself.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece to talk about, because that's the last thing anybody wants, is to not be able to exercise, right? So there's this sort of, what level of challenge can you continue to do safely, that'll keep you in the game, right?
So Nell, Heather brought up fear of falling. And so that fear of falling actually is more disabling. It creates more problems sometimes than the actual risk of falling. So as therapists, we look at, what is somebody's risk of falling? So what does your true balance look like? How steady are you? Different bases support. What is your vestibular? Heather mentioned the vestibular system in cats, right? We have a vestibular system that helps us keep our balance and react to balance challenges. But your slowness of your reaction has to do with that slowness or bradykinesia with your Parkinson's, right? That narrow base of support prevents, it doesn't allow you to get that catch your balance as well, that preventative stuff. So looking at fall prevention, but also looking at reducing those risks of falls and what you can do. Kevin, maybe there are things you could be doing to modify your environment or to change things up to lessen some of that risk of falling, some of those, where you usually fall. Is it a turn? Is it a certain threshold? Are there things you can do to kind of change that environment or change the risk so that you reduce your risk of falling without, I think I had a volunteer at one of our courses say because his doctor always asked him, how many times have you fallen? He was afraid to do things. So it created a fear of falling in him. And he was afraid to go up the stairs by himself because the doctor always asked him about falling. So it's all about finding that right balance between, making sure you reduce your risk, you're doing all the things you need to do, you are staying strong and healthy and keeping those balance reactions. But you don't want to stop doing things like you had to do, Kevin, because then your Parkinson's symptoms are going to get a lot worse, a lot faster. Everything else kind of suffers for that. So it's a balance between fall prevention, and stopping doing things because they're risky versus, reducing that overall risk of falling.
Right. So actually, just real quick, Samantha, can you put the home safety checklist link in the chat box? So we created a home safety checklist a few years ago, and there's a lot of really great quick tips in there about how to set your home up, if there's, to mitigate some of those potential fall places. But go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, early on in my disease, I used to tell people I don't fear falling. I fear not being allowed to fall by other people who are trying to protect me too much. But that's sort of evolving as I progress. The reality that falls can happen is a little sobering. And I think we have to do the exercises like one-legged balance and challenging all the things you want to, that to improve your balance, because without it, as Tom said, falls will eventually come their way. Gravity always wins.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about some of those things to get a little bit more, strategic for everybody on the call. And while, you were saying you can have somebody assess your sort of risk or in your balance. And so this is a really great PSA to go see a physical therapist. There's at no time, is it too early to see a physical therapist with Parkinson's? totally understand that not everybody has access to a physical therapist. So you're not going to get in trouble for not doing it. It's just a really great thing if you do have access to it. But that's why we have Maria today. So what are some things that people can do at home to maybe assess their balance, and knowing obviously that not every day is the same. So you can't be like, oh, yesterday my balance was perfect, whatever. What are some things that people can do sort of when they wake up to kind of get their bearings and to make sure that they're in a good spot?
So a lot of falls happen when your attention is diverted, like when you're not paying attention, right? So a lot of falls happen when you're thinking about something else and you go to turn, so your body's starting to go and your feet don't go, and so you stumble over those feet, or you end up on the ground, or a near fall, like Kevin was saying. Those near falls are important, and to know when those happen and how to prevent those. So starting off with that good wide base of support is really important. Sometimes people, you end up with your feet too close together. Sometimes a staggered stance, one foot in front of the other, is a really good position to get started. You can get moving easier. You don't tend to have that freezing or getting stuck as much, because you can weight shift out of that easier. So to move, you have to weight shift. And if you've got a narrow base of support and you go to shift your weight, you can't really get your weight off of one foot to pick up that next foot. So that leads to some of that forward hastening, or that, shuffling posture. So there's, making sure you stand up tall, you get that good deep breath, you stop before you go, right? A lot of people with Parkinson's have trouble with things kind of run together and you keep going faster and smaller. And so you need to start with a good tall posture, maybe take that deep breath, maybe think about where you're going to go next, and not just get up and start going and have it be in that kind of hastening or festination kind of posture. So sometimes just taking that time to stand up tall, because if you don't have good posture, if you don't stand up tall, you don't have good balance. Think about dancers and how good their posture is, and how much better your balance is when you're really in a good upright posture. So that's something you can immediately do, is just stop, take that deep breath before you go, make sure you're standing up tall, you got your feet in a good position. Those kinds of things are easy things to work on as a starting point, right?
Yeah,
having a light.
Oh, go ahead.
Getting that, your eyes up and looking up instead of down at the floor, having good lighting, all of those things. I'm sure a lot of that stuff's on your home safety checklist.
Yeah. And some people, they'll even in their kitchen, they'll put like pieces of tape where, okay, I'm doing my coffee. These are where my feet are, right? Like I'm going to do this. It's just a cue, it's not like I'm 5 and I need to be told, but it's a cue that reminds you, right, to do something.
Right. Because that external cue, the tape or a reminder of some sort, will cue your brain. You can, all those pathways, you can still do the things. It's just your brain doesn't do it automatically anymore. So sometimes you have to have those external cues just like that.
Right. And Heather, a lot of people have talked about, yes, music is sometimes the very best thing for people. Audible tones in their ear and their headphones, a metronome, things like that. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about music?
Yeah, a beat. My mother would be happy about this. She's a music teacher. So is my grandmother, and a lot of people in my family. My brother is also a music teacher. To find music with beats per minute that work for you. So have that ready. Have that in your phone, whether you stream music from Spotify or whatever. Just have a group of songs in case you really get stuck. It does help. Put your headset on and just sort of like, I like to use, you can tell by the way I walk my walk, I'm a woman's man. No time to talk. And you've got like a beat. So I'll sing that as I'm walking down the street, no matter where I am. But Darby Schlosser taught me a very important thing. Rather than focusing on getting from here to there, which might be pretty far, you take it in smaller increments. And Maria can speak to this too. Maria knows, probably teaches this as well in your therapy, where you just go, okay, I'm going to take from here to that wall. I'm going to do 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. Don't go, oh my God, I've got to get over the threshold. I've got to get through the doorway. I've got to get past that wall. Break it up and just have that beat ready with your music.
Right. Music you love will make your brain spurt out more dopamine. So that's why music is so important.
Yeah,
that's good. But yes, that just breaking things up into short little spots, getting, instead of thinking I got to get through the threshold, it's like I've got to take 3 big steps, right? Or 10 big steps. Or you can do a technique called destination estimation or prediction, so that you just say, oh, okay, I think I can get there in 6 steps. And you will do it. If you plan it, you'll become really intentional. Your focused attention is really, your brain's really paying attention, and you can get there, and you'll get there in 6 good steps. So that's a great strategy, Heather.
Great.
Maria,
Kevin and Brian, and then Christy.
Maria, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
There are people on this call and in our audience who are not yet having trouble falling. Is there any evidence that training before you fall versus waiting till after you've had issues actually can slow down that progression to falling?
I don't know, Kevin, of specific. I know that therapy and using exercise can reduce risk of falling and prevent falls. So yes, even if you are relatively newly diagnosed and you don't think you are having some of those issues, a good physical therapist that understands Parkinson's can help you figure out how to move better, right? And what some of those problems areas are that, like you all said, well, I wasn't diagnosed, but before that I had symptoms for quite a while. So even newly diagnosed people do fall. I fall, right? And I don't even have Parkinson's. So I can work on the challenging your balance is that important part. Practicing those things that help you learn to catch your balance with those different perturbations. So I think, yes, definitely it will help. But I don't know specifically the research on it, but I know that there is research that shows that exercise will reduce risk of falls in the general population. So it will work with Parkinson's as well.
Yeah. And also, if you just think about, take Parkinson's out of it and take 2 people who fall, one person is fit and healthy and strong, and the other person is not, that the person who is not is likely to, have a little more consequences to that fall than the person who's strong has got the muscles to stop themselves. They've got the strength to get themselves back up. Right. So there's a lot of things there, like Parkinson's or not, is certainly relevant. Christy.
Wasn't Brian going to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
So one thing that I found when I started having falls early on was I was misjudging things with my eyes. My perception was off, and I was told that that was a Parkinson's thing. And since I've moved to a new place now, I'm having near falls all the time because it's, I lived in this other place for 15 years. Most of the time I had Parkinson's, and now I'm here and I misjudge and I hit cabinets or stools, or I'm like a drunk old man who has to drink. But a lot of it, I think, is perception for me. And then there's the other things, but I wanted to know if you can address that, because I don't know for sure how much that's Parkinson's.
Okay. No, it is Parkinson's. So one of the things that happens, there's sort of a reduced self-awareness of where your body is in space. It's your proprioceptive sense, and that's also processed through your basal ganglia. So it's a problem in Parkinson's. So you tend to cut the corner too short and you bump into things. There is also some visual problems in Parkinson's that can have to do with depth perception. But what you would probably benefit from some of those external cues, or start working on planning. You have to take a wider route around that kitchen counter, right? You can't, and so maybe you need a little tape on the floor or a little something that kind of gives you that visual cue of where to really go, because your steps get smaller and tighter, and you just kind of run into that corner too easily. So I would, and the other thing you could do is be to look at, chunk like Heather suggested. You take smaller spaces and you look, you plan, and you kind of have to think ahead. You have to plan your movements out a little bit more. So when you're distracted, when you're thinking about something else, or you're carrying something, or you're doing something, those are all, dual tasks. If you're changing directions or turning, or, that's all dual task, which is harder for your brain. So you have to be a little more intentional about what you're doing. That paying attention is a big part of preventing falls.
Well, and just to add to that, because this is another aspect of Parkinson's, but I have a service dog now. to help me. But he's been trained for a year by professionals that I hired, and I picked out the dog, and so they knew me and knew how to train him for things I need. And now we're getting to know each other, and we're getting into that bonding thing. But I'm falling over him all the time. He's underfoot, you know, I can't, and I have to kind of watch his feet and watch where he's at, then I got to watch where I'm at. And so it's crazy. I'm stepping on his toes or tripping and bumping. And so for those who are looking at getting service dogs, you got to be aware that it takes kind of a learning curve time. But it is, you're right about slowing down. And I'm in physical therapy for things now. And that's the big thing they say is you just got to stop and breathe, slow down.
So metronome, Heather, I think mentioned that, or Mel did, talking about a metronome. So pacing for you would be a slower metronome, or if you were using music, you would choose a slower beats per minute. So those are things that could work with you to get your brain to slow down a little bit, pay better attention, use those auditory cues. That's another kind of external cue, like having, you know, a tape line on the floor or something else, but those auditory cues could help you slow yourself down and not get into that sort of going faster and all of a sudden now you're tripping over your dog, right?
So Neil Diamond instead of the Bee Gees?
Yeah. As long as you like it, that's good.
Yeah.
All right.
right.
Christy.
So I have two things. So as Heather was talking about music, so this is pretty wild what would happen earlier in the semester. So I was having a lot of issues with being off. And so I would walk down the hall at work and I'd be off and then I'd put on music on my phone and I'd totally be able to walk totally normal. And I had my colleague watch this just to make sure I wasn't insane. But music really is pretty remarkable to just put in if you feel off or you feel off balance. It just can really help. It's quite amazing. And during the summer in July, I had two pretty reasonable falls. So one was in the kitchen at bedtime. I was feeding the dogs and I don't know how it happened. I was just on the floor. So I don't know what happened from like time carrying the dog food to being on the floor. Like there's no way I could stop myself because it just happened so quickly. And then like a week later, I had a fall in the bedroom and then I woke up early in the morning and I was trying to go from the bedroom to the living room and my face met the bookcase. I had no idea what happened. I was up 1 minute and then I was down.
Do you have NOH?
Nope.
No blood pressure issues?
Nope, my blood pressure is totally fine.
Well,
So
it doesn't,
bizarre.
it's like the change in blood pressure, right?
No, it doesn't change.
Nothing.
Nope,
Wow.
so after a while for that, my husband was he was more shook than I was. My face, I ended up with a pretty nice hematoma on my face for a bit and bruising. And after that for a little bit, everyone made me walk around if I got up in the middle of the night with a cane. For the first 2 weeks after that, my husband wouldn't let me get out of bed by myself. But then I adjusted my meds and that seemed to have really helped being in tune with that aspect also. So the physical therapy, the exercise, which I do, and also making sure that my doctor's on board with changing my meds. So adding in extended release carbidopa levodopa has been really, really useful and really helpful for me, along with adding in Ongentis to have the extender has been really, really beneficial. And I have been much more stable at night since then. And I feel like that's a good thing.
That's great.
So
Good.
important that
Welcome
you
and back.
talk. Yeah. So important that you talk to your doctor, like you know, kind of keeping that diary or knowing when you're, you know, what's happening with you with your meds. And if you're starting to feel, you know, there are things you can do rather than just, you know, if you're starting to get off, you can use music, you can use some kind of rocking or weight shift or stepping to kind of just get things going again as kind of, you know, little compensatory strategies. But ideally you want your medication to be as optimized as possible. And your doctor only knows what you tell him, right? So that's really important that you work really closely. And if you're working with a therapist, they can help too, and they can also help you communicate with that doctor too to help get that medication optimized, because that's super
I
important.
think what's really important to also mention is that your meds will change. It's not something that stays stagnant. So it's going to change over time. So it could go up, it could go down. You don't really, you just need to know that you probably need to change every so often, right? Exactly.
Right.
Constantly changing, Heather, constantly.
And things in your life can change how your brain is working, right? So if you're really anxious or stressed, then nothing's going to work as well. Your meds aren't going to work as well. If you're having more problems with, digestion and constipation, your meds are going to have a harder time getting up to your brain and getting absorbed. So all of those things are going to affect how things work as well. So every day can be a different day. That's true.
Exactly.
Doug?
I've only had, I think, 2 falls in the past year, but like Kevin was talking before, I've had a number of near falls where I lose my balance. And I noticed that when I was falling forward, it was almost like I was bending at the waist and not getting my balance. And the physical therapist that I work with recommended me thrusting my hips forward if I feel like I'm starting to fall. And that seems to help. And another thing completely, well, I guess somewhat related, there's an app that I've heard of called Nimble Training, NYMBL. And I think it's made by someone here in Colorado. I've seen infomercials on TV, and it prompts you to work on your balance, and it has brain games. I haven't tried it. I think it's advertised as free for people over 65. I don't know how they monitor that, but might be something to check out.
There are lots of great apps out there for, that kind of those set switches, like stepping forward, stepping backwards, side catch, those are all those faster movements that you need to have to catch your balance. So something that works on those will be helpful for sure.
Yeah. Kat?
Yeah, though I haven't experienced a lot of falls, I too have had many near falls. And I just want to touch on a little bit the mindfulness piece of this equation. Because for me, each time that I've come close or have had a spill, I have been and trying to walk at the same time, or putting a jacket on, or and I think for many things with Parkinson's, we do it better. Thank you.
She froze.
Oh, she froze. Heather, you froze her.
Being well.
You froze for a second, Kat.
Being well. Thank you. Everyone's getting their books. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys are the best. I talk a little bit in a book called Being Well. I'll go off now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that anxiety piece is really big. It's because it's easy to get anxious when that happens. And I think it's, great to tell the person you're with or the people that you're with, maybe like some rules for walking with you. Like if you get distracted easily and then you can't go, just be like, hey, we're walking over to the store next. Can we just like focus on getting to the store, and we're not going to have a bunch of conversations while we're trying to get there. And then you can say like, oh, I'm feeling a little anxious. Can you help me, calm down a little bit here? And then we can breathe together. And we can move on to the store, whatever you're doing. But I think that, if you happen to be with somebody, that's also a really good strategy. If you can't kind of pop in your music right away and be like, hey, help me out here.
We don't always want you to have to compensate and not do 2 things at a time, but you need to practice. You do need to, therapy is the best place to do that, to work on that in a situation where you can really work on those balance reactions, work on stepping, work on those things that require doing set switches, whether they're cognitive or motor set switches, where you're having to do 2 or 3 things at a time, which is life, right? Life is constantly changing. We're turning, we're moving, things are happening around us. So you don't want to just say, I can't ever do 2 things at once. You want to learn strategies for when you get into those situations, but you also want to train your body to be able to work more normally as well, too.
Kevin and then Brian.
One of the questions that came in, which I don't want to overlook, is someone asked, what do you do when you live alone? And I think that, while as I'm looking at my partner-in-law spends more time with me now, there are times when we're still separated. And I sometimes wonder, is it good to be alone? I think wearing a watch or having a communication device near you, if you should fall and can summon help, is really important as we progress. The other thing is I like to do things where I go off on my own. Like I love to ski in the wilderness, the back bowls alone. Probably not a good idea anymore. So I always now try to find a buddy, or at least let someone know where you're hiking, walking, or biking in case something should happen. I think those are just sort of the adjustments that we make. One simple thing that really works for me, which we haven't talked about, is clearing the clutter in your life. If you can clear the clutter and have a clear path to where you're going to, I just mentally feel better when that happens. I don't know if others feel the same way.
Right
For
on,
sure.
Kevin. Yeah. It's clutter and then make smart choices. Like the one time I fell hard was when I was trying to hang something on the wall and I stepped over my bike. And I thought, well, I'll be able to do this. Well, I hung the thing up fine. I turned around to walk away and my shoe caught the pedal and down I went. I just said, putting everything down, move the bike, hang the thing up, and then go on. But we're knuckleheaded men and we do stupid stuff. So what can I say?
Brian.
So one of the things along the same line that when I first started having really bad problems with falling or gait was the dystonia in my feet, the cramping. And it got so bad that my arches broke and my feet went from normal to, I think I'm now on 6E or 8E with shoes. But the cool thing is I've discovered Botox in the feet. And so I get it every 3 months. I have the cutest, adorable feet now. But what happens is once I get the Botox, I can move the toes again because they're like paralyzed from the dystonia, but the Botox frees them up. And then my physical therapist tells me, start crunching a towel or something and get those toes moving. Or I go in the pool and I step on my toes and I come back down and try to get them moving. And I'm finding, I'm sitting here now and I'm tremoring, but my toes are wiggling and I haven't felt them wiggle in a long, long time. And I just got Botox about 6 weeks ago. So it's a great thing to look at if you're finding your feet are a lot of your problem.
So Brian, a basic primer, just a real quick primer on balance. So to keep our balance normal, everybody, we use whatever is touching the ground. So typically when we're standing or walking, it's our feet, right? So we get surface information from our feet. And then we use what our eyes are telling us, and our eyes are very predictive sense. So we rely a lot on our eyes. So whatever we see, like if you're in the car wash and you see those things moving and you think you're moving, it happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was sure I was moving because your vision is such a strong sense, right? And then we use our vestibular system, which is deep in our inner ear that tells us if we're moving and what direction we're moving and how fast we're moving. And then our brain takes all that information like a computer processes it and decides what to believe, right? Because it isn't always this, some things are kind of unreliable. So if your toes are cramping up, you've got dystonia, you're not getting good surface information down through your feet. So it's going to obviously impact your balance. If you don't move a lot, you get sick, you're not doing a lot of moving. You're not like when we're young and we're running around. I'm here with my 18-month-old granddaughter and she just moves all the time, spinning, twirling. So that movement gets your vestibular system tuned up, but when we don't move, we don't use that system, it gets lazy. So we move our head and we get dizzy or we're not sure where we're at. We get really reliant on our eyes. We don't have good sensation or problems in our feet. So, you can work with all of those systems and get them better. And then your brain has to also be able to process all that information and decide which sense to rely on more. So sometimes using a cane or using hiking poles or just having that visual reference will help you regain or keep your balance to know where you're at. So there's lots of ways a therapist, and I, of course, as a physical therapist, I'm going to recommend you see a good therapist, can help you with all of those things, because your Parkinson's affects a lot of those different things, you know, with that tendency to have, you get more dependent on your eyes, your movements are not as quick and as easy as they are, you get stiff, right? That stiffness that comes with Parkinson's typically is a lot in your low back and hips that kind of keeps you from getting that nice wide base of support or getting that protective step out there. So, you know, there's a lot of things you can work on, but that base of support, as you said, Brian, your feet really are an important link to that. And if
So,
you don't have good sense,
along those lines, Maria, is there any evidence that being barefoot, like in your house in a lot of places, actually helps you with the strength of your feet, and it will help you when you actually have to wear shoes out?
well, there's some good research out there that's saying doing things eyes opened or eyes closed on different surfaces does improve balance, right? So you can walk barefoot if that helps you get more information. Part of it is what system do you pay attention to? So you're feeling your feet, Brian, and you're able, you know, like that, not knowing that you're back on your heels and all of a sudden you pick your head up and you start to fall backwards. Well, a lot of times there's a lot of questions I've seen about backwards and people having trouble backwards. Sometimes you don't even know you're starting to fall backwards because your vestibular system's a little lazy, and then your reactions are slow because of your Parkinson's. So you don't catch yourself with that step, right? So you tend to, that's that pull test the doctors do with you, and they pull you and you just fall backwards, right? So lots of different surfaces. We do usually in therapy work on, you know, either foam surfaces, because that makes that surface more compliant. It does make you use more feet and ankle strategies instead of big hip strategies to balance. So it does work to help with balance. So that all that helps. Eyes open, eyes closed, different, you know, moving your head, all of those things will help tune up your vestibular system, and your brain has to start making some of those decisions again there. Right. Oh, good. She's putting good
Christy,
stuff.
Doug, and Heather, I think.
I just wanted to put out a little PSA about devices. So Apple Watch, I was wearing my watch when I fell both times. My watch did not notice I fell. I did not get a fall notification. So if you're alone and you're worried, make sure you're carrying your phone so that you can call for help. So I don't know if it's just something weird I did with mine, but it didn't acknowledge that I fell.
So you have fall detection and it didn't detect your fall? Huh.
I did. I know that the fall in my kitchen was like ridiculously slow, but it was really pretty hard when I actually fell. When I finally made it down.
Yes, your pockets. You wear your phone. Wear your phone.
Yes.
Or a necklace. Wear something. We don't want anyone by themselves when they fall in. Doug.
Just want everyone to not really rely just on the Apple Watch.
Yes.
Great
Yeah,
advice.
you should have your phone.
Christy.
Yeah.
Great
I
advice.
live alone, and that's one of the things I do is always make sure I have my phone in my pocket. I also take things slow and very cautious. Kevin, I sit down to put on my underwear.
That's
Hot tip,
TMI.
Kevin.
That's TMI.
And also my balance is bad, but I've got very flat feet, and my physical therapist recommended I get custom orthotics, and those have helped a little bit as well.
Nice. Heather.
I was just going to mention one tidbit because Maria mentioned ankles and feet and focusing on that. I find that when I'm really stuck, I can focus a little more on hips and larger movements, because I get in my head about my feet not moving, and then I get stuck and I do that little stutter step, and it's really, that's when I fall. So for me, I'm just going to add this in. I can take it or leave it. Darby Schlosser, again, she taught me this little trick when she was here visiting, where I move my whole hip and I pretend like I'm going to do some kind of a big dramatic, you know, dance. After watching my arms and legs in space, it tends to help.
And I might say big and dramatic for Heather works. big interview.
Oh, no.
In
Gotta
everything.
love it. I gotta love it, Heather. I love it.
Goodbye.
No
Have you ever
drama
noticed how you can
there.
like run, but you can't walk? Or you can cycle,
Yeah.
but you can't walk? It's because it turns out the simplest things are actually quite complex.
They are. And so that's true. That strategy is you don't try to, it's not thinking I've got to move my feet. It's that I've got to stand up tall. Maybe it's that shifting that weight. So if those big movements, those, get you going, then that's what you've got to do, because it's a whole body thing. It's not, I talked about feet because that's part of our balance system, and having a good feet support is important. But to get yourself going, it is a whole body movement, not just thinking about one body part. So that is important. Somebody mentioned stairs, and they said they did on the chat, and they do better with stairs, right? That they don't have trouble with stairs because that's external cue, right? So you have to pick your foot up to get up to the next step. So that's automatically an external cue. So usually stairs are pretty easy for people with Parkinson's. I saw one time some woman made a holographic staircase for her father's floor because he froze so much. And so his brain had a task to do. It had to go up the stairs, right? So that task specific side of his brain worked instead of the automatic side. So you can override those problems with your automatic side if you give your brain a job to do, a task to do, right? So kind of interesting to think about those things. Practicing turns, that's a great thing to do with your therapist, right? There's lots of different ways we turn, and you need to practice that. You need to learn how to get that foot out of the way to turn it, because that's what we do automatically, and that's what's usually missing is that weight shift, that anticipatory weight shift, and turning that foot out, right? So all those stiffness and things run into, those same problems. But I love the idea of that whole body, something big and dramatic. That works too.
And Heather, no one that is on this call is going to get stuck and not picture you. They're going to all do it. They're just going to all be like, Heather. I'm channeling my Heather Kennedy right now.
I get so many dates.
Right? Heaven.
I found that I've actually shifted some of my exercise regimens. I used to think that if it wasn't aerobic or weightlifting at real extremes, I wasn't getting a workout. Now I'm finding that dance, Tai Chi, sun salutation poses really work well in yoga. And trying to incorporate a few of those things every day is helping me. And then I have a tip on what doesn't work for me. Then this happened last night walking back from the restaurant after having one beer. I was stumbling like crazy. And I find that alcohol really affects. And you're talking to a guy that lives in Boulder drinking beer and used to live in California drinking wine. You got to cut back on that kind of stuff.
No argument here.
Here either.
Brian, is that your hand up?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
One thing that I've been told recently, and then my physical therapist got on me this week about it. I was told when I'm walking with friends, but we're doing like a good solid walk, that I look down too much. And I say, well, that's because when there's too much going on, too many people, it's too much and my brain kind of gets overloaded. So I kind of shut down a lot, because that's what I do when I'm shopping and stuff. But then I'm at the physical therapy place yesterday, I think it was, and I'm riding the bike, and she said, look up. And I said, oh. And she was saying, I've noticed when you're in here, you're looking down all the time. She said, with Parkinson's, your body wants to go that way. You're going to start curling sooner. You've got to pay attention to that and pick up and look up. So I hadn't really caught that until, now I'm looking back at that walking and seeing. So I think that's a tendency we don't notice.
Kat?
And I think the fear of falling also, I tend to look down more. I have to really coach myself to look up, especially when I'm symptomatic. I'm really concerned about falling. So I've got to teach myself to look up. My husband will tell me that, Kat, look up. So
that's part, that head down, looking down you get more into that posture, and then your balance is actually worse, and you can't really pick those feet up. So your feet start getting behind your head and shoulders the more you get there. So that feeds into that festination, that shuffling, creates more problems. So, in a crowd, that's, thinking of ways to, it's like you're anxious a little bit about the crowd and you're trying to block out those other distractions, but maybe instead of looking down, you need to, you do have to look down to see what's in front of your feet, make sure there are no obstacles when you have to step over things, but you also can focus on something in the distance, right? Look up, pick something to look at, kind of give your brain a way to get, reduce some of that noise and clutter that's going on around you, but try not to get into that posture. So is it the posture? Is it the Parkinson's pulling you into that posture that's causing you to look down? Or are you just looking down because you're fearful of falling? There's lots of reasons that you could be getting into that posture, but you need to be, really upright, nice and tall. Yeah. And if you're going to strength training is important, but think about all those postural muscles that you need to keep good balance. And they're usually all those things up and down the posterior chain. So lots of extension strengthening and lots of good stuff. Yeah.
We are at the top of the hour. So thank you everybody for showing up. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Maria, for being here. You
You're
offered
welcome.
so much and so
Thanks
great. And I know
very
there's
much.
Great
Thanks for having
information,
us.
Maria.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Maria.
Good. Anytime.
Thanks,
It was nice to
everybody.
meet all you.
Thanks, everybody.